Hello and welcome to Nonprofit Ed Solutions. I'm Becky Abrams-Wilmot, and I'm excited to share with you a little bit about what it means to be a nonprofit and then just a little bit about working with me to become a nonprofit 501c3. We're going to dive right in. The goal is to keep this short and sweet, but to hopefully give you some good information moving forward. Our first slide is going to talk about what is a nonprofit. So a nonprofit is formed for public benefit. It is a type of a corporation. So it provides legal liability protection, just like if you formed an LLC or an S Corp, you have that same type of protection. But it is formed for public benefit, not for personal benefit. So there's a social purpose usually when you form a nonprofit. A nonprofit is not owned by anyone. So that's important, especially maybe you're a founder and wanting to start something that is on your heart, that is important to you. But it's important to know that while the founder does have a really strong influence and can be on the board and all that good stuff, it is not something that you own. And we could talk more about that. It's definitely not as negative as it may sound kind of going into it. Um, but it is operated by a board of directors. So, like I said, you can be on the board as the founder, and then the IRS requires that nonprofits have at least 3 board members that are unconflicted. So sometimes people will ask, can my mom be on the board? Can my brother be on the board? Maybe. But if your board is really small, you only have that 3, then that's not going to work. So if your board was significantly larger, you may be able to have a limited number of those conflicts of interest. But ideally, you'll have a board of at least 3, and they will be unconflicted members of the board. And they run the organization and are legally responsible for managing it. Nonprofit organizations will often go on to become a 501c3 or maybe another form of 501c. There are other designations as well. 501c3 is the most common, educational, religious, literary, scientific. There's some other classifications qualify for 501c3, and most groups you will want to be a 501c3 and not a C4 or C7 if possible, because 501c3s are the only 501c designation that can take tax deductible donations from donors. They can take that tax deduction. So 501c3 is ideal if you can qualify for it. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Why become a 501c3? Why become a nonprofit 501c3? So I kind of skipped over, but a nonprofit is formed in your state with your Secretary of State. You fill out paperwork and become a nonprofit. So you could stop there, but you don't get that benefit of those tax deductible donations, and you are not tax exempt from the IRS or your state corporate income tax until you become a 501c3. So you want to go that next step and go ahead and do both of those processes, nonprofit in your state and 501c3 with the IRS. So why become this nonprofit 501c3? The first one that we've already talked about is tax exemption, being tax exempt from the federal IRS corporate income tax. And then some states, not all, but a vast majority will also recognize that 501c3 status and let you be tax exempt in the state as well if you have state income tax and sometimes even state sales tax. So most states are a little bit different, but there are some definite perks there as well. Another reason to become a 501c3 would be grant eligibility and discounts on software and other things, websites, and there are other areas where you can potentially get a discount, the bank even, because you're a nonprofit. And then grant eligibility doesn't necessarily mean that you can't take a grant if you were awarded a grant as maybe an LLC. But it's a lot easier to qualify for a grant if you are a 501c3. A lot of granting organizations won't grant unless you're a 501c3. Legally use volunteers. So fair labor laws, there's a lot of paperwork out there that define fair labor laws. And if you really dive deep into it, it's not a legality for a for-profit entity to use volunteer labor. So if you are a 501c3 nonprofit, you can navigate a lot easier because then you can legally use volunteers. So facility use needs is the next one. If you need to use a facility, potentially a church or a public building, if you are a for-profit entity like an LLC, an S Corp, you may jeopardize the property tax exemption of the facility that you're using. So if you're going to partner with the church and use their building, and they have a property tax exemption because of their status, their tax status, and then you are a for-profit, you could potentially cause an issue for their property tax exemption. And, whether you get caught or not remains to be seen, but really, who wants to operate that way? So as a 501(c)(3), you don't have to worry about it, and you risk, potentially causing conflict with your host facility or causing them to lose their property tax exemptions. The next one is sustainability. The nonprofit, because it's not owned by you, it should keep going when you're ready to move on, or if you step down or something happens to you, it's not 100% reliant on you. At least that's not how it's supposed to be. You have the board of directors and then maybe a program director, volunteers. The idea is that it's more of a community effort, even in your little nonprofit community, and that it is more sustainable because it will outlive the founder, is the goal. That was my experience. I was a nonprofit founder in 2014, started a homeschool co-op and grew to a homeschool hybrid program, and then moved into this work at Nonprofit Ed Solutions in 2021, resigned from my nonprofit, the nonprofit that I started in 2023, and it's still going strong. So my kids are still there participating, but I'm not actively part of the leadership, and it's still going. So that's definitely a pro in my book. All right, we're going to move on. Am I ready? Are you ready to become a nonprofit 501(c)(3)? So it's helpful to kind of, before you maybe connect with me or start filling out paperwork, to kind of know, do you have your ducks in a row to start that process? So it's important to start with a mission and a vision, and there's a lot of resources and worksheets and things out there for that. I actually have one on my website in my store, a mission vision template to help you kind of get your thoughts on paper for what you want to do. You need to have a name picked out and maybe do some searches, especially in your state, to make sure the name is not already taken in your state. And then you could look on the IRS name search, the tax exempt website as well. It doesn't have to be different than the IRS name, but it might be nice to not have it be the same as something that's already out there. So, but it definitely can't be the same as another organization in your state. So do some searches, get a name nailed down. And then forming a board is going to be one of those first steps. You'll need, like I said, yourself and maybe two others at minimum. You'll need funds to pay the state and the IRS fees. So that your state nonprofit incorporation is going to have a fee anywhere from like $20 to all the way maybe 90 or a little bit more. It's a one-time fee, and then there are some annual renewal fees for that. And then the 501(c)(3) application to the IRS, the 1023. If you're going to use the 1023 full form, it would be $600. If you use the 1023 easy, it's $275. So those fees are charged when you submit the application to become a 501(c)(3), and you'll need to obviously have those ready to go before you start that. And the last one I put is time. You do need to have time to invest in this. You don't necessarily need to have a ton of time. And like I talked about, it is run by a board and volunteers, and the more you can delegate some tasks would be great. But you definitely, getting something like this off the ground and putting together policy manuals and maybe handbooks for your participants is going to be really helpful. So having a little bit of time to put into it. And then you can kind of see down there on the bottom, can I have a nonprofit and an LLC? And that's a question I get asked a lot. It's a big question, but I thought I'll just throw in a bonus. You could, but you have to be really cautious with which way the money flows, because the IRS is giving you that tax exemption, all those benefits. There are definitely some prohibitions from the IRS on what a 501(c)(3) can do, and you definitely cannot use the funds, the revenues of a 501(c)(3) for private benefit. We talked about a nonprofit is public benefit, so you can't use those funds for private benefit. So if you started a nonprofit and a 501(c)(3), and then you started an LLC, and the money from your 501(c)(3) was going to your LLC, that can create a really big red flag. And there may be some small negligible ways that that could work, but for the most part, it's it's not going to be something that is going to be legally sustainable. So we could talk more about it. You may have a unique situation, but if you were thinking, well, I'll form this 501c3 to raise a bunch of money, and then I'm going to just give it to my LLC because we do all these cool things at my LLC, that's not going to work. So anyways, bigger discussion potentially there, but I thought I'd throw in that little side bit just because I get that quite a bit. All right, we're going to move into if you're working with myself at Nonprofit Ed Solutions, I do offer assistance for that nonprofit incorporation and the 501c3 application. So to get started with me, we work through an engagement contract. And I've got my little tidbit there. Your journey begins with a clear engagement contract outlining our partnership terms, followed by a deposit to secure your spot and initiate our work together. So I offer assistance with the 1023-EZ, which is a shorter form, and the 1023 full form. My fees are as of this recording in 2026, my fees are $400 for the 1023-EZ and then $1,000 for the 1023 full form. So I do require a portion of that as a deposit. And those fees potentially will change in 2027. So definitely check my website to see if those have been updated. I've got a little scroll through of the contract here that, and I can send you a full copy if you'd like, but it just outlines what I cover. A lot of it is assistance because you're the one creating the organization that you're making. So I don't necessarily do a lot of it for you. I provide you templates and guidance and advice and support and motivation and all those important aspects. But I don't write everything for you necessarily. I provide, like I said, I provide you templates and then you'll need to fill in the blanks. So we can dive more into that again later on if you need. I'm going to scroll through that one more time. And yeah, right there at the top. So I will research your eligibility to apply for 501c3 tax exempt status, assist you in navigating your state nonprofit incorporation, assist you in forming a board and bylaws, assist you in obtaining an EIN, draft the 1023 form, and then partner with you to submit the form. So those are kind of the overall views. And down further, you might have seen, keep in mind that my fees don't include the IRS fees or your state fees. Those are separate. And then one last thing in there is I always like to point out that I don't help you with the nonprofit incorporation. I help you with that 501c3 application, the 1023. And then we get that all wrapped up and you get all of those. I kind of track with you until it's approved. But I don't sometimes there are additional state forms and it's very unique to each state, maybe charitable registration or sales tax exemption applications, things like that. So I can help you with that, but it requires more research on my part. And so I can do it for an additional fee. So just keep in mind as you move forward, there might be a little bit more work on your end. And I provide you with some resources where you can do that research, or I can do that with you for a little bit of an additional fee. Okay, the next step, I want to show you the checklist that I use to work through with my clients. You'll receive a comprehensive checklist that preview and help us keep track of all the steps that we move through in the 501c3 project. A lot of the tasks can be completed simultaneously, so it streamlines the path to nonprofit 501c3. So we will scroll through and you can kind of see how I've got it formatted as a Google Doc. It's shared between you and I so that I can see your work. You can actually click the boxes and it checks off the steps as you go along. There's instructions and links posted with each step to try to help guide you. And then there are definitely aspects of the project that we will do together as well. There's a questionnaire at the bottom to make sure that you're eligible for the 501c3 status. So I ask that all my clients fill out all those little yes or no boxes and make notes for me if you have questions to get those filled in as well. So the checklist is the basis and the kind of the foundation of the 501c3 project that I work through with my clients. And it's really important that you work in the checklist, check things off, make notes for me as you go along. And that definitely guides both of us as we make progress. All right, the process that we work through, communication is essential as we work together. I keep you informed at each stage as I'm seeing your progress. I answer your questions. I ensure that we're aligned with your nonprofit's goals and your progress. If you have a timeline that you're working within, make sure you let me know so we can try to stay within that as well. But if you have questions or need help, definitely reach out. There are aspects of the project, like the nonprofit incorporation, maybe getting an EIN, reviewing your bylaws. And obviously the 501(c)(3), the 1023 application. Those are all steps that we would usually do over a Zoom meeting and do those together. And I mentioned this one already, most steps can be completed at the same time. This efficient approach helps streamline it. And then the last part I want to point out, each founder is unique in the level of support that they need. So I have a lot of the resources there, videos and blog posts and things that you can read and make progress as you go. But if you would like more hand holding, I can do a little bit more than that as well. And so, like I said, there are some standardized times through the project that we'll meet over Zoom. And then you can reach out if you have more questions than that too. You can always book a phone or a Zoom appointment with me on my website if and when you need help or need to talk through the checklist steps. Okay, I think we got through all of it. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. If you'd like to get started and want to hop on board and get some help navigating these processes, definitely reach out my website. Hopefully is where you're at. That's where this will be posted, so you should be able to find me pretty easily. My email is Becky, Becky, at Nonprofit Ed Solutions. And then you can always hop on and book a call or a Zoom directly on my website on my booking page as well. So if you would like to talk more about this process or about working together, please reach out, and thank you for visiting. Good luck in your journey. You are doing good work.